Yeah, Liv, I look very much forward to this conversation about one of my favorite topics, namely conflict. I've been working with conflict for 30 years, but I've almost exclusively been working with conflict between people, in maybe mainly in workplace settings. You're a psychotherapist and you work with conflict in maybe different ways than I do, but it's such an ubiquitous phenomenon. So maybe we can start that you say some general things about where do you encounter conflict, and then we'll dig deeper into the different aspects of it.
Sure. I was wondering though if we could define conflict first to see.
Yeah, maybe conflict means something different for you than for me, because I'm working with conflict between people. So my definition of conflict is that conflict is a situation or process where there's one or more parties who have some kind of desires or wishes or want something to be different than it is, and they are dependent on someone else to fulfill those wishes. And when that doesn't happen, there's a blockage, and that blockage generally leads to frustration, and the frustration leads to action, that you try to influence the other person. And when those four parts are fulfilled, there are wishes you don't want to live out, there is a blockage, there is frustration, there is some kind of action, then we have a conflict. That's my view. And obviously it's not so relevant for internal conflict, where you have to adapt it a little bit.
Well, actually, that would, you could translate that description also to thinking of it as you have like different parties then inside of yourself. Yeah. That is contradictive and having a fight, not agreeing, and don't know how to solve it. So it's interesting when you describe it externally, because it's pretty much the same that also would happen internally. It's contradicting forces, and they are not listening to each other, or they don't even know they exist. They don't hear each other out, and it becomes very frustrated, and they collide, and then they need help from a third party, or from your own third party, from your own awareness, to acknowledge all parties, all sides, so that they can sit down at the table.
That's really similar to what's going on between people. But to what extent, practically, do you work with people, so individuals in the internal conflicts, and to what extent do you also work with conflicts between people, for example, couples?
Yeah. So. Yeah. No. The time when I do work with external conflicts, that's between, when I have couples therapy, then it's two individuals with their own internal conflicts, their own inner fights, and that has turned into a fight between them. So then you have sort of your hands full. You have both to work with their inner conflicts, everything inside of them to be heard, and then also between them. So that's one setting. And I could imagine then working at the workplace where there are several peoples, then it's the conflicts in the individuals, and then that's turning into conflicts between several people, between a boss and the employees. But it's couples that I work with, and then also as a teacher I have groups, trainings in a psychotherapy method, and that then there it also can be conflicts. But then the setting is quite nice, since there are psychologists and we're supposed to work with their internal life. So then they are sort of aware of that, that you can get help to work with yourself, so that it doesn't turn into a conflict in the group. But there can be also contradictions, and conflicts in the group or between me and a student, say. Since it's a quite complex setting, always when there is a boss or a leader or a teacher, the employees or the students or the patients, they often project authority, or they often project parent on the leader.
Yeah, sure.
So it's good if you're aware of those processes, I would say, as a leader, so that you understand, okay, they are just kids or siblings if it's a group, and all of these sceneries play out. So in my professional life, it's mostly external conflicts, couples, or in groups. But then, individual therapy, it's as you say, it's not. Then I don't work with the other party. So actually, when I've come to understand, I feel that, to me, the therapy is almost more effective when I have another party in the room. So, for example, when there is a couple. Because then I can look at the individual and see, okay, this is his or her problem, and this is what she's saying or he's saying about the other person. And then the other person is there and can nuance the whole thing. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to, you only have half of, then you don't have the whole story. So in a way, if the patient has a problem with relationships, I prefer to have a witness or to have the other party. And that's another discussion maybe, but I in a way, I find it interesting, when the tradition of individual therapy, like what is it that you actually promote, or what is it that you strengthen? Like you strengthen the person's own narrative about him or herself, but maybe it's not a good one always. Maybe it should be challenged and the reality should come in. So actually it's more efficient when you have a group or when you have the other, and it's so nice, it's so healing when you have a couple, and you can work both individual, and the other person can see then that person's vulnerability, which then triggers the other person, so that and then they can heal together and witness together, and then doing solve the external conflict.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. I would like to go back to one thing you hinted at, I think, namely the question would be, is it your experience that when people can more or less resolve their internal blockages or conflicts, that it's far easier then to deal with external conflicts that the person has with other people? Because of course it may also be the case that conflicts between people really has to do with needs, and needs that are not fulfilled can create significant conflicts in close relationships and so on. What's your experience about the relationship between resolving internal conflicts and also being able to get somewhere with external conflicts?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question, and for sure, I think obviously, it's logic, like in my experience as well. And the more you worked with yourself, and the more you can satisfy your own needs, truly satisfy with love and compassion, and as say a nurturing parent would, not satisfy your needs as avoidance. Or as a defense, nobody else cares about me, so I better do it myself, but with bitterness, then you're still in defense. But the more you have healed yourself, which basically is to working through your inner conflicts and your inner unprocessed emotions, then you are more centered in yourself, you are more independent. Independent is a difficult word, because that often goes to, that you don't need anyone. So you're more centered, I would say, and more in love with yourself. You're more your friend, you're more your parent, you're more there for yourself, you're more support yourself. And when you are able to support yourself and you are aware of your own needs, then you can also, of course, more easily hear and meet someone else's need, and you can also support someone else's needs, and you can more easily communicate your own needs. Because I would say that's often a trigger to conflicts, when you have expectations on the other person that it should meet your needs, but without you saying them, because you don't know yourself and you are at loss and you didn't have a parent who met your needs, etc., etc. So you have all those expectations that you should be met in your needs, but you don't communicate them, or you just don't see anyone else's needs. So that's generally, a problem when you have differences in opinions. It triggers a lot of emotions, anxiety and emotions, because you have differences in opinions, because then all that system gets triggers. I want to be heard, and then the other, I want to be heard too, and no one has the capability of
making
listening.
space for the
Right. So I would say yes, it's definitely, of course, when you are more centered with yourself, you are more healed, you have worked through your own conflicts, you can be more present for others. However, I think if you are a person who, say, are very logic, not an anxious-driven person, because they often, everything comes out and then it's a mess, and so then conflicts can get easily stirred up. But say if you're more avoidant or with your emotions, and you're very logically and you're very rational, I think you can get quite far then in being good in dealing with conflicts, because you then have a brain that can have perspective. So which is, I would say, one factor that I would be interesting to see what you say then, but to have a perspective of the whole, of yourself, of the other, and the situation. So I think you can come quite far, even though you say you have your own problems, maybe you have traumas, and you have avoidant attachment system, and a complex background, but you have a genetics that you got a brain with a lot of logic and rationality. I think you can come quite far in being good in solving conflicts, but that person will get triggered in close relationships, so it won't get that far. But as a working space, maybe it can work until maybe someone pushes you too far, or then you get too rigid and so on. But yeah.
I prepared a couple of questions for this conversation, and I know you know that I wanted to ask you about some salient common reasons behind internal conflicts, but I wanted to ask a leading question first, namely, what do you think is the role of having a kind of perceived serious deficiency in your life, that you miss something that you feel is important to you when you are dependent on others? The Buddhist teacher Trungpa talked about the poverty mentality, the sense that something very important is missing in your life. Is that something you encounter in people that trigger also both internal and external conflicts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that a lot of people describe their mental health issues with they describe that feelings of being alone or disconnected often, and at loss, and some say explicitly that it's something missing, or I want something more, or some say I have it all but still I'm not happy. Mm-hmm. But I would translate a lot of what people are saying about their mental health, that is some pieces are missing, or there's some missing. Mm-hmm.
I asked the question because before you talked about the favorable conditions for being able to deal with external conflicts, and I heard out that you think that when people are integrated, when they have resolved their internal conflicts, then they can be open to really go into dialogue and make space for others' needs and the views and so on. And then I thought about the obstacle of being preoccupied with others are not giving me what I need. So
Yes.
I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, because that's often the way it goes. That there is something missing. Because let's say the circumstances when you grew up, not only in your family of origin, but maybe also in the society you grew up in or the culture. But just the circumstances when you grew up gave you the experience that something that you didn't get all of your needs met, or maybe none. Yeah, it is worse. So in a way, and as a child, it should be the environment or the circumstances that would give you your needs. And so in a sense, it's true. But it becomes a problem when you are an adult and you still have a child inside of you who have something missing, and that child, of course, hopes or expects that the environment should
provide.
Yeah. But you're not a child anymore, so then it becomes a problem, and it becomes quite unattractive, non-charming when you are a child packed in an adult body, and also not only that, but also that you are not aware of this childish wish. It is a lot more
Neediness,
charming. Yes. But neediness can be quite charming, at least if you are, honest with that it's the child's needs. But most are not. They package it in an adult body. So the short answer to that, when someone is something missing in my life, and maybe they say, it's this and that and that and that, and then the short answer, well, yes, it's something missing. It is something missing, and it is you. So you are missing.
We already concluded here that dealing with conflicts is both an internal work you need to do with yourself, integrating and see to it that you can somehow, to a reasonable extent, satisfy your needs in order to be able to meet others. But also it's a social work between people. So there's a whole package here about something missing and that you feel you need and so on. What are some other internal sources of conflict that you see in your work?
So one source of conflict is the fear of abandonment that many have. Again, not only because of your parents, but also because of maybe you started childcare too early, or and experienced a lot of separations. So the body learned that, well, I cannot rest, I cannot be calm, because I will be abandoned, and I'm not ready for that, says the child. I was not ready for that. So say you have this fear of abandonment. However, as a child, since there were abandonment and there were separation and no repair, so the child had to deal with it herself. So there was a separation, and then no one came to repair. Nothing, no contact. So the child isn't stupid, and the human body isn't stupid. So it figures, okay, what to do? Well, instead, okay, I have to shut down then my needs, or I have to shut down my feelings, because it's just too painful to experience, this abandonment all over and over again. So I come up with a defense, and maybe that defense is even the opposite of being needy then. Being being
self-sufficient.
Yeah, so the defense is self-sufficiency and very independent, and then that becomes a problem for your reparation, because then when you're adult, the environment reads you as someone who abandons, actually. So as an adult, you are the one who abandons, because you are very independent and you don't need anyone, and you can do everything your own. But behind this wall is this little girl or boy who's shit scared and don't want to be abandoned, but acts in a way so that you have control over the abandonment. So you abandon everyone else, and then I have control, and then I don't have to feel my feelings. So that is a quite common conflict of you have this fear, but you don't give yourself the possibility to repair it as an adult, because you just...
And we come back to what you actually do when you encounter that. Is there anything else that you see as very common reasons for having to do internal conflict?
Let's say, you have a need to be heard and comforted, say. Be comforted, and physical touch, say, when you're sad or you're scared. So you have a need that someone hugs you. But again, your experiences with that as a child were harming in some way. So when you were scared or sad, and maybe you were a personality who wasn't so open with your needs in the first place. There are some personalities who don't know what they need. And you had a parent who didn't see that, okay, this child is scared or is sad, I come and hug. So you didn't show it maybe as a kid. But then you get bad experiences because you were alone then with your sad feelings or with the scared feeling. And again, it got too threatening to feel it. And then even, not only you shut down, but maybe you start to act in a way when you're sad that actually pushes people away, or you act ugly, you act, maybe you start to fight to distract from what you actually need. So you do the opposite of what you actually need. So if you're,
but then fight can also be feeling in contact.
Yeah, so you rather, exactly. So you rather have the contact of a fight than no contact at all. So that's a good point. Like when you're sad and so, but you don't know how to, get a hug, and that's also,
vulnerable.
Yeah, to be vulnerable, and it's associated to, pain and scary feelings. So you do what you can, and that might be to start a fight. And because often after a fight, you have some sort of repair. So that's very common theme, actually, that kids learn. Well, after the fight, then it's calm. So then I start a fight, and so then I get actually repair. But however, it's at the cost of the child. It's because the parent gets angry at you, or as an adult, if you start a fight, that becomes the theme or the topic instead. How you did wrong or annoying you are. That's always angry or blah blah blah. And then you not only you don't get comforted, instead you get blamed maybe for being difficult person that is always angry and da da da. But at least you got the repair or hug maybe afterwards. So you do everything at all costs. So that's a sad contradiction, but it's very cute in a way. The body's how it's trying to get their needs met and sacrifice themselves.
But what we have talked about are really profound things that also are connected to a lot of vulnerability, and that means that opening up is connected with risk-taking, And I imagine that's something you need to work with when you work with people, both individually and in group or couples, for example. Support. Can we shift over to talking about when you see reasons for or explanations for conflict in what is going on in relationships rather than connected with what people bring from their biography? What do you see as types of conflicts or common conflict themes between couples, for example? Maybe partly the same things.
Yeah, a little bit, but one very common theme, I don't know if that's a theme, but I'll try it out, a description anyway of a pattern between in a couple. Say one couple is more emotional, or the emotions are on the outside and more anxious and more needy and more, wanting to be saved by showing everything, and the other one is more detached, more avoidant, wanting to be alone. And if those people meet, it's difficult, since let's say you have a discussion, they have a discussion, and yes, they have different opinions, and that triggers, oh my God, we have different opinions, and maybe now it's a separation of our minds. So different opinions can mean separation from the contact. Maybe we will get abandoned or separated, and maybe we will have a conflict. So then both parties get anxious, but the anxious one reacts with being more needy and needing more reassurance and needing more contact, and the avoidant one get anxious but reacts with needing more space and wanting to be alone and think and be silent. And the problem is then that they re-traumatize each other, and they don't solve the conflict. So the anxious one is going after and feeling left alone, and feeling like the avoidant isn't there and understanding her feelings, and the avoidant partner instead is feeling very invaded and cannot think and not being left alone. So that's a common dynamic and a common obstacle for them to actually solve whatever the issue is, which might not be a big thing then. So I don't know if I would call that a theme of conflict, since that's more the dynamic that makes them not to solve the conflict.
But I'm curious about to what extent do you see this as different temperaments or personalities that are quite basic? People are different, simply. And to what extent do you feel that there is a background in unresolved internal conflict stemming from the biography?
Yeah, I would say if it would be a matter of different personalities, then maybe an issue would be one person thinks very fast and wants to solve things very fast. And the other one wants to, think it through, be slow. That's not inner conflict. That's not a problem. That's just different personalities. And then they need to understand how the other person's mind work and how the other person's brain work in order to meet in the middle. So the fast one, it can be good. They can use the fast one when sometimes, and they can be complementary if they understand that they are different. So that's maybe what counseling could help, like someone to explain. Well, you works and this is how you work and this is how you work. So, and I heard once, so I don't know if it was the couple therapy or therapist or someone who said, in a conflict, you should say to your partner, can you explain that so that my brain can understand it? And then I can explain it so that your brain can understand. So that's a nice way to put it, so that you cherish each other's differences instead of just expect that we all work and think and feel in just the same way. Yes, we are all the same, but still in a sense. But
yeah, maybe it's a tangent, but I've been working with adult development research and theory for a very long time. And when you say this, I think that people are at very different places in their skills or capacities for understanding someone else's mind if it operates very different from your own. So do you think that mostly it's possible for example, in a couples therapy, for people to understand more and be able to make this kind of simulation? What could I say that would be intelligible to the other person? Or do you sometimes meet limits there where it isn't really possible for people to do that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's true. It is actually a quite complex ability to be able to take someone else's perspective. It's often something we say lightly. That of course I can understand you, but when you think about it, to truly get in the other person's mind and then also feel their experiences and to really understand where the other person is coming from. That's a quite complex ability. So definitely has to do with age, obviously, and development. And then, of course, well, I don't want to go into discussing diagnosis, but yeah, of course, I'm thinking of autism spectrum, like where it can be more difficult to do that, to go and take someone else's perspectives. It doesn't mean you can't understand it, but I guess you have to understand it in a very logical, like someone really explaining it. Because that's actually another theme that's common, that you have expectations on the other one that they just cannot meet. And then you take it personally. You interpret the unmet needs, not as, that I'm rejected, I'm not listened to, you don't want to understand, where it's actually that is a disability. That's because of either personality or upbringing or culture. So that's often, that's a theme, that you expect the other to be all adult and be able to take your perspective and understand. And if both parties think of that way of each other, then
it's difficult.
It's very difficult. And often in a more complementary couple, then it works, and it's one adult who's all understanding, and then one kid that can work.
Different roles.
Yeah, so expectations and to really, again, understand yourself. It's not conflict or not, to really know what are my strengths, what are my disadvantages, what is my ability, and
Any other common patterns you see between couples as themes where conflict centers around?
Yeah, one more concrete conflict is, of course, around living. That it's chaos, maybe, that they can't decide, like basic stuff like where to live, and obviously if there's a divorce with kids, like who should have the kids when or what, like what week. So that's more concrete. So that's that's also common in economy. Like we have different ways of handling the economy. We have too many projects going on, and we don't know how to prioritize. So actually, when there are like more concrete sources of conflicts that stresses the couple, then it might be better to actually hire someone, a consultation with someone who sort things out for you, and like counseling with Excel sheets and whatever, like this
Very
is
concrete.
very concrete, so that their nervous system will calm down, so that they can think. Because you really need to think if you're going to solve a conflict. But if you're overwhelmed out because of the external issues, then you can't. So in that case, I recommend them to. Then I have said maybe once that I think you should get help firstly. It said that the other day. Firstly, with solving this issue, because this is not a first-hand psychology. This is, this just triggers. Yes, and because of the chaos.
Decision making, prioritizing.
Yeah, and because of the chaos that you can't do that, then you get all flooded, and then maybe your inner conflicts come out. But it's not efficient to try to solve their emotional life if it's burning, it's a fire outside. So you need to do first things first. So that's actually.
When you're talking, I'm comparing a little bit how I encounter and work with conflict and how you do it as a psychotherapist. And one part of the conflict management field is conflict coaching. And I've done quite a lot of conflict coaching, and I've also trained other people in conflict coaching. And I think it's important to have an understanding of what you're doing when you do have that kind of conversations, because conflict coaching is not therapy. So when you see that things are triggered that require some kind of therapeutic process, maybe I'll do the opposite that you do, that you say, give the advice to someone. You need to talk to someone who can help you with these practical matters. And here it is the other way around, that maybe you need to seek a therapist to work through how the shadows of your past is influencing what's going on now. Because conflict coaching is primarily about assisting the persons to develop a strategy for dealing with an actual situation that is going on between yourself and other people in some way. So it's quite practical. It's not going in so much into the deeper reasons why you have the feelings you have, and why you get so anxious, or why something feels so important or hurting or something like that. So I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but maybe I wanted to hear, is it for you both that you sometimes use conflict as raw materials for therapeutic processes, going back and going deeper? And are you also sometimes in situations where it's more conflict coaching to assist the person to develop more clarity about what is really important to me, and what are the alternative ways of dealing with the situation, and what are the pluses and minuses of different alternatives and so on? Do you recognize this difference?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, for example, if there is a couple and they have a disagreement, they have an issue of some sorts, and then they start to talk, first the first person and then the other person, and then they express, this is what I think, blah, 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 and then this is what I think. But then very quickly I see that the first one interprets what the other one is saying, and they're projecting something. They interpret it like, no, this is your interpretation in your mind. This is not what he said. And then he reacts defensively on that because he feels it's unfair, and then he projects, I don't know, a criticizing parent or whatever. And then then it goes very quickly. And then I stop them. Because then it gets too messy. We had a concrete issue that we could talk about, but then I see, well, they can't because they get triggered. So in that case, I choose to, stop, and then I maybe say, okay, so I hear you had this issue, and then I heard you reacted in this way, and I understand it's because of this and this. And then he reacted in that way because of this and this. So then I explain to them, this is what happened, and this is often what happens, I suppose, between you. This is why you cannot talk about this issue. And then, yes, it has been times when I have helped them to think about the concrete issue, like how to solve it. And I suppose, yes, talk to them like, so instead of have this communication you just had, why don't you try to be silent and when he talks, for example? Why don't you try to just practice the ability to really listen? And then maybe I explain what it means to listen, and I say, let's see how that is for you, like if you can. And then it's very difficult. They want to.
But I wanted to spend some time teasing out what are your experiences and maybe assumptions about what is actually effective, or I would talk about it as theories of change. What people who are locked into conflict, internal conflict or social conflict, what is helpful for them? What function can you perform to help them open up and get from a destructive or locked process to a constructive, solution-oriented process?
So I would think of firstly two fundamental factors. And the first one is that the person's nervous system has to be calm. So that goes for children as well. If a child is screaming, I've done this mistake many times. If a child is angry or sad and you go, oh, what's wrong? And then you try to solve the feeling by talking, discussing in that moment, which is a fail. Because the child has a lot of feelings and is upset. So it has to calm down first, and then we can talk about it, so that you have your brain with you, your rational brain with you.
So how do you do that when you have people who have high affect or...
Right. Yeah. So it helps if you as a coach or therapist or facilitator is very calm yourself. Like really calm, not just trying to be calm, but have sort of a calm energy and try to be present and almost talk maybe or clear and slow. And then to really listen. So you have to be prepared that in the beginning you can't solve everything and you can't get them calmed in the beginning. But one thing, so you have to be prepared that they want to vent and they want to talk, but to really firstly listen. And listen with a lot of presence. And I'm not saying this just because, mindfulness is trendy or that it seems like a good idea. It actually works. I've noticed myself that the more I've worked with being calm myself or understanding truly what it means to listen to someone, the better conversations I get or the better results I get in the conflict solving. So to not interrupt, because when you interrupt someone, they get really stressed, unless it is really, again, hurtful behavior. But generally, to listen and to really listen, trying to listen what they're saying, the content in it, and also the different themes and and why they're saying what they're saying, and not listen in order to I want to just say something myself. No. Because actually, I think this, I have no research on it, but I sense that the person feels that I'm not really listening. Yeah. it just looks like I hear what they say, but I'm mostly focused in myself that, oh my God, what should I say myself? And I need to be smart, I need to solve their problems, I need to do this and this and this for them. I think that they then sense that and then they talk even more. Because they sense that I'm not really there, and then they get stressed and they need to explain more and more and more. So I've noticed throughout the years that the more I've been able to leave my own mind and get into the mind of the person, into that person's body, that calms. Then I don't have to do something to calm them down. It's just by me listening and me being present. And I myself was quite fascinated how effective it is, and because I used to think it's, of course I listen. I thought that before, but no, that's an ability. That's actually a skill, really, to truly listen to the other person, and that affects them so that they get calmer, and then it's also to be a role model for them. Like if you think of a parent with 2 kids, then the siblings act toward each other as their parent are treating them. Mm-hmm. So you also, as a therapist or a coach or whatever you want to role model, this is how you listen to someone who is upset. Yeah. And so that they can understand how it's done.
And imitate that kind of behavior. Yeah.
So also, of course, explain, and also, of course, use your verbal language. But I think everything is important. Everything gives the message. Everything is educative in teaching them. So you cannot fake it, or you can, but it becomes much better when you yourself are.
Are there also concrete things you do in order to make sure that people feel heard? I mean, in mediation, you really can summarize what the other person said in order to make sure that they know that their message has been received and understood.
Yeah, some things I often say is, I repeat what they're saying, and then so do I understood you correctly? Or is that right? And then I understand, or I ask their partner or the other, so is that right? Or what do you think about this? And that's also something I've become better at the last years, or through experience, that instead of rushing and again just being driven to help them and for them to hear me out and my methods and my voice, etc. The more I've been to, do I mean more humble in that? So this is what I see, and I often prepare like that to say. So I'm going to tell you now. I'm going to give you some feedback. So this is what I perceive that you're saying, and then you can say if that's correct. So
that's exactly what you do in mediation, for example, as well, and in conflict coaching also. Yeah. I think you mentioned there are 2 important things.
So being calm is one thing, and to repeat. So that's what you could do, is to listen, but also again to make someone feel heard. That also calms someone down. So what we said, to repeat and to ask, is that what you heard? But then also to help them think, to help them get perspective. Mm-hmm. So when you're calm, then you can get in touch with your brain much more easily, and then you can develop the ability to observe your own thoughts and feelings, and then the other one's thoughts and feelings, and maybe even both together. So have like a meta umbrella over the whole thing. So you need to be able to think and gain perspective, not only perception, like not only from my point of view, because many they just feel or think, and they don't think about what they think. They don't look at it. This is what I think, blah blah blah. So that's perception, but perspective would be more, I hear myself have this thought, and this is what I think. And then you can ask, why do I think it that, and why do I feel that? And then you can do the same thing with the other person. And that's also an ability for sure, and a skill. So when you calm, it's much easier. And as a therapist, of course, that is my main role, know that's yeah, to calm them down, to make them feel heard, but then also to give them feedback on what I see. So I'm their third party, I'm their third eye, and then I can help them to do it themselves.
I also think about the role between the more cognitive processing and the more emotional processing, because when you work with conflict, of course, as you say, it's very important to create a kind of emotional space where you can open up, and if you're too preoccupied with your own reactions, you don't have that kind of action space. But in conflict work, when you work with workplace conflicts, for example, it's often very, very significant part of what makes it possible to start working toward the future and solutions and so on, that people understand their conflict, understand how things work, why the conflict works as it does, and maybe explanations why it emerged at all. It can be organizational conditions, for example, rather than the other person being bad in some way. To what role does helping them understand how things work, what role does it play in how you work with conflict in relation to the more emotional processing?
Right, because I do work with, I would call myself an emotion-focused therapist, but I do think that I prefer not to, to support someone to say have feelings without understanding why, and without, say, for example, if someone starts to cry because, oh, you hurt me, I feel so hurt, and then they cry about it. So of course, I mean, if it happens, they need to do it. But I prefer to, again, first calm system down, be present, and then to help them discuss, and so they can get a clear understanding of what's going on. And what then often will happen is that feelings can get triggered that belong to them, or that's not just, oh, you're so bad, boo-hoo, or I'm so angry at you because you don't understand me. I prefer to not go that way because I don't think it's so helpful. It just enhances the dynamic of this perpetrator and a victim, and it maybe feels good for the moment, but it's not for the long run. So yes, then I prefer to help them first understand, and then the feelings will come, but maybe a grief over how they could never make themselves heard, or maybe then a reminder of how they weren't heard as a kid, or grief over how they pushed the other person away. I mean, those kinds of feelings are often more, core feelings that are more helpful and also more healing for the couple, instead of you are so bad and I'm so. That's not so much healing in that kind of emotions.
There are so many interesting questions, but we don't have as much time as we would need. I would try to limit myself to 2 further questions, and then we can see. And an interesting conversation I have had with colleagues is, what is actually conflict resolution? What is success when working with conflict? And a smart colleague of mine said that successful conflict resolution is when you can transform a destructive conflict to a constructive conflict. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are resolved everything, but you interact in a different way. So do you have any ideas about what is success when you work with conflict?
Yeah, I wouldn't agree on that. That to me, success is not that they think the same way, or there is a solution. That's good if there, but first that they can tolerate that there are 2 different minds, and that they can tolerate that they have maybe 2 different opinions. That's success for me, to be able to tolerate that emotionally and intellectually. And then often actually often some sort of solution might come, because then they have the foundation to solve the issue. So that's success. And I think that tolerance often is quite low, and that's not only because of upbringing, and I feel that's a societal issue also. That's another discussion, but and I think we have discussed it before, like differences in cultures also, like how keen you are to express your mind and how you tolerate, how much you can tolerate different opinions and how you express opinions. And
emotions.
And emotions, yes. And in many cultures, the ability to tolerate different opinions, or the ability to tolerance that someone else is having an emotion, and that it's not your fault, or it's not your responsibility, etc. I feel that tolerance is quite low in many cultures, and so that's because that's the foundation to actually be able to solve the conflict. I think it was a patient who said that, or some feedback about how important was a couple. Important it was, she said, for me, to really first be in myself and to center myself, to hear my own voice, and the more I could hang out or experience myself, and the less anxious I got about my partner and like how is he okay and blah blah blah. And the more, and when I had been to myself for a while, then after a while I got curious. She said, yeah. I got curious. Oh, what's he doing? Yeah. What was he thinking about? What are his emotions? So I think that was a beautiful description of what is necessary. Yeah. That you first need to be with yourself.
Our German colleagues often use the word Selbstklärung, that you clarify what's important to you, what you feel, what your needs are, and so on. And it's often necessary in order to be able to really meet other people with an open mind, to be grounded in who am I, where do I stand, what do I find important, and so on. In American mediation literature, they would talk about empowerment as a quite overlapping conflict. But I think Selbstklärung is a good word to help people to really get clarity about themselves in order to be able to meet other people.
Yeah, because often we either speak about only me, or we should all understand each other, and then that's the way to be more tolerant. That's often like a narrative in society. So you should be more tolerant to each other's differences, and we should understand. Or I feel like it's often split. Like it's either that, or you should focus on yourself and to develop yourself and your own needs and that. But I would like the narrative that connects those a lot more. Like in order for me to tolerate you and to connect with you and understand you, I do have to first understand myself. That's my experience anyway. And which has nothing to do with being egoistic or nothing like that. It's just the foundation. I need to be in myself. I need to have a brain. I need to have my thoughts. I need to have my emotions cleared out to be safe, so I can live myself and be with you. And that I think that's how a connection can be made and tolerance can be made.
So my last question is that if you have accumulated a lot of experiences, you have learned a lot and so on, if you try to connect with your accumulated wisdom, do you have anything that you would say to people about what are important skills or forms of awareness that are really helpful in dealing with the conflicts, both internal and external?
Yeah, I would say to just always remember that we are all just trying to do our best, always, and some has a very lowest high of their best because of their disadvantages. Yeah. and it helps to think of us all as kids, I think. So that can actually give more empathy with yourself and with other people. So I think that helps to always remember, like, oh, we are all just struggling, we are all just little, vulnerable victims, and we just tried our best, but we covered ourselves in just ugly defenses, maybe. That is not to our advantage, but just remember that we're all just,
So that's about how you think about people or perceive people. And so are there any particular skills that you would point to more direct?
Yeah, I would definitely point to practice the ability to be silent and listen. I mean, if you can do that, then you have come far.
Yeah.
To not interrupt, to listen. And
what makes it so difficult to keep your mouth shut and really be open to what other people are saying? Because
everyone has wounds, so they just want to be heard, and they have their egos, and they don't want to be forgotten, and they want it in a certain way, and they can't let go of it. They're rigid. There's so many mechanisms that makes it terrifying to let go and trust and listen. And I don't mean that you shouldn't talk about or have opinions or express yourself. Not at all, because that's also as important. But it's just do it from a foundation of listening first, because then you can also hear yourself better.
From my background, I think I would add one thing, namely I've been increasingly focused on the role of narratives. So I think it's difficult to really open up and listen to someone else if you are very firmly embedded in a particular narrative that points out what things mean and who are you and who am I and what kind of person are you and mine and what did you do and what did that mean and so on.
Yes.
So in the same vein as you was talking about, to be able to tolerate that the other person has a different narrative than mine, and it's not about the right narrative and the wrong narrative, but there is, the world is simply like that there are different ways of understanding things and interpreting things, and we all spin up those narratives. Okay, is there anything else that you would say before we conclude?
Probably, but because this is a very interesting subject. But I think we covered
Quite a lot.
Yeah. So I'm satisfied with it.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you.